title for today's webinar is How to Do Advertising Like in the Good Old Days. And I picked that mostly because, firstly, in the marketing industry, there's a sort of, rose-colored glasses about how things used to go. But also, the way that advertising works or doesn't work has changed completely since the advent of the internet. And as you'll see, it's my personal opinion that we kind of ruined advertising as a consequence of a lot of incentives that you get through online advertising. I'm also going to talk a lot about tracking and how the way that we're looking at results is influencing our marketing strategies and influencing the internet as a whole, even societies, and see how we got to the point that we're at now. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we also could do it, what could be better, but I think also just where the market is going in general as far as marketing goes. All right. So once again, we'll talk a bit about, I'll call it the digital house that advertising built. How do we get here? What is our current situation? And what do we do now in terms of marketing industry for our clients, for our brands, and so on? I'll do a short introduction. I'm aware that a lot of you have probably heard of our agency, worked with us, or otherwise are familiar. Just a quick introduction. We're an international marketing agency, and we work with sort of enterprise and larger mid-market firms. And we work with those clients on SEO, paid advertising, but also sort of more on the strategy and measurement side of things. We're in a few locations in terms of offices, but also a lot of staff around the world. Our main offices are in Copenhagen in Denmark, in Krakow in Poland, in Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, and in Switzerland, nearby Zurich. We, as a sort of independent agency, we operate globally in many different markets, and I think one thing that our clients have in common is that they do advertising and marketing in a variety of countries from their headquarters, and we are very well equipped to help them with that. This is me. It's a lot of beauty on one slide, so apologies for that. I'm a partner and an owner at the agency. I work on a lot of the nerdy SEO technical stuff, but also strategy and other things like this. I come from the finance industry, so I managed global marketing at Citibank's online trading business, and I worked for Saxo Bank in Copenhagen as well. Also involved in politics and a lot of other stuff, but I'll leave that for another time. So get right to it. The digital house that advertising built. It's not a very good house, I'm sorry. I think for consumers, we see that it has created bad media, clickbait, outrage culture, addictive behaviors, and we see that a lot in social media, but just in general as well. There's an erosion of privacy due to companies and governments hoarding data. But for marketers also, there's just too little focus on brand building, sort of data paralysis. There's a lot of waste because we're interpreting results based on bad incentives or a misunderstanding of what this data actually means. And we're having to deal with a lot of fraud and robots, which is a lot easier to do online. I'll talk more about that later. So how do we get there? So I'm a last generation that knows the world from before the internet and sort of grew up with the development of the internet. So I was online pretty much from the beginning, and I still remember how marketing was done back then. So one of the things is that, and I'm going to talk here about incentives. So I think a lot of how we see the online world, the marketing world develop has to do with the incentives that the people that shape this industries have in mind. And so the incentive in the beginning was, could describe it like this at least, that online advertising was bought based on impressions. So basically, I have a site. This gets this many visitors if they knew. And basically, the quality of those impressions didn't really matter. The incentive was to get as many eyeballs as possible. And because of that, media quality sort of started to suffer, and we see this play out throughout the history of online advertising and the internet. We then started to judge the response more based on clicks, because we thought, okay, well, people are actually interested in an ad, they're going to click on it, and the incentive became to create ads that got clicks no matter what. So I don't know if you remember, but there used to be these banner ads where there were little games inside where you had to throw a dart at a dartboard or do other stuff. And it really didn't matter. It had no connection with where you were going to, but it got clicks, and that's what they were selling. And so large, confusing, and irrelevant ads came. And I'll tie this all together a little bit later, so stick with me here. Marketers then started to realize that clicks in themselves are not that great, and we started to focus more on audiences. We used to do that based on media titles. If you placed an ad in the New York Times or in the FT or whatever, you'd know what type of audience you'd reach and in what type of context your ads would be seen. But there's only so many readers of these publications, and so the thinking went, the same person that reads the New York Times or FT also consumes other media. And what if we could just actually tag that person and say, this is a person that is clearly interested in finance or whatever because they read the Financial Times. If that person is on yahoo.com, they're still the same person. So, we should get more higher ad rates. And this was sort of the thinking behind targeting using data and how publishers got a bigger piece of the pie, at least initially. So we then started to realize that clicks or impressions don't really mean anything if you're not actually driving any conversions. And so the incentive then started to become focusing on those people that were already ready to convert. So search advertising and retargeting success is largely based on this. So these are people, if you know the marketing funnel story, that are in the very last stages of the funnel, and that probably would have happened anyway. So we then started to get a very confusing situation, because if a person converting saw a print ad, then clicked on a banner, then searched and converted, which channel is responsible for that conversion? So the incentive for advertising channels is to all claim credit for that conversion, especially if you're the last one to touch that conversion, so the last channel that someone interacted with. I think very plainly stated, simply stated, I think those are usually the best explanation. The incentive for advertisers was really to focus on that last touch channel, because it's way easier to explain to your boss or to your finance person, because try explaining to that same person, well, in 1992, I placed an ad and this person became familiar with my brand. Then they, interacted with their friends who had a buying experience, and they saw a print ad here. Then they went to our website, and in 2016, we placed an ad, and then they converted. But, really that last ad should not get all the credit because of all the other stuff that happened before. No, it's too fuzzy. Like, people just don't accept that type of explanation. At least in a lot of organizations, they don't. But the downside of this is that results lagged for a lot of firms, especially the larger ones, and that became a problem. So seeing that in a lot of cases, online advertising didn't drive much incremental business. So this is business that, if you would stop all advertising, what is left, at least for a while, you get a certain baseline. And then, if you turn back on the advertising, the difference between those two situations is actually the incremental business. And as a result of people thinking about this, they started to think more about attribution. And measurement vendors started to implement models that could, hypothetically speaking, unpick the relevant contribution of each channel. So in that example that I gave before, if you had all of that data in your systems, you would then say like, okay, so this channel got a little bit of the credit, this channel got a little bit of the credit, and we have a more complete picture. So first of all, that's not really true because those models are kind of arbitrary in many cases. They also don't have all of the relevant data in it. And they could kind of say what you wanted them to say, but anyway, it required a lot of data. And so the incentive for everyone was to create a sort of digital data gold rush, as well as the infrastructure required for controlling all of this data. So you saw vendors charging hundreds and hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars or whatever a year or a month to do that sort of stuff, and became a business model in itself. So then that kind of leads me to the current situation that we're in right now. I'll discuss a few different channels one by one. So firstly, in social media, it's a rent-a-friend situation. So Mark Zuckerberg might need that service, but let's leave that aside. Social media, I don't know if you remember, used to be you can build communities, you got likes for your page or whatever. And then there was a sort of implicit promise that you could use that audience to market to them. So Super Bowl ads were like our page and follow what Coca-Cola's latest thing is. And then, all those brands started to invest more and more and more in getting audiences on those platforms. But then Facebook was, or some of these other platforms too, were like, well, we're not really earning that much. So why don't we actually kind of limit the organic growth and start charging people to reach their own audience? So even amongst people that have liked a page, you will only get like 1-2% will see any messages that you post organically, and that is limited on purpose so that brands will start to pay these platforms. So we got walled gardens. There's no price transparency. There was some audience transparency, but not anymore. There's also no medium is the message effect on social media. So there's a thing where if you advertise during a very, what seems to people, expensive event like the Super Bowl or the World Cup, or if you place a billboard on Times Square or wherever, there's a sort of implicit trust that you drive because this is known to be expensive, but also people know that other people see this ad. So it's hard to explain, but that drives the sort of trust in itself. Whereas if you are advertising on social media or in other places, like anyone, any plumber, butcher shop, whatever, could place an ad there one-on-one to you. There's no such sort of impressiveness. And then what comes with it is the ad creatives that people are using, because you could just, put something out and see how it works. Companies are not spending that much time on creating very nice, high-end creatives, and this drives down trust as well. There's also no contextual relevancy for the most part. So in a lot of cases, that person might be that person that reads the New York Times. So you could show them an ad for investments, but they could be looking at cat pictures at that time. Like there's just no connection, and that's also just not good for brand trust, awareness, or any of these metrics that you might want to use. Users, they see only what the algorithm decides, and there's less and less diversity of opinions because of that. And there's some toxic social effects of social media. Then again, it does work to some extent because your audience is there, and if you bombard people enough at a low cost, then at some point you're going to get some result from it, and it's going to at different levels be worth it for different companies. Kind of similar, search engines are also moving towards a black box approach. Less and less granular input as to how you target, and more just hand over the money and we'll figure it out for you. We'll do what's in your best interest. There's an inflation of costs. You can see if you look at Google's quarterly reports that the average cost per clicks only go one way, which is up. So their earnings are good, but the ROI for advertisers, as well as the availability of clicks, is going down as well. There's a pay for play. So it used to be that in search engines, you would have a lot of opportunity for organic, and where only a small fraction of search queries were shown PPC ads. And we're now, I think, a bit in the middle of moving away from just transactional and commercial intent keywords to also including informational intent keywords, and AI will have a significant impact on that as well. If you don't know what those words mean, so informational would be something very broad. If you're a cat food company, you might see an ad, a search query for how to my cat is throwing up, cures for that, and then you normally would have a nice article on your website to show up for that query, so that there's some awareness of your brand, and that will stick in your mind when you're in that supermarket or that website to buy the cat food. But Google has recognized that there's a large untapped portion of searches that they could also sell advertising on, and that's where they're moving towards. On the SEO side, we've moved away from sort of how many links you got, more quantity side, to quality metrics. And finally, we're now more towards the attention of audiences. And I think part of also AI and everything else is that we see more and more that the winner in any category, as far as SEO goes, takes all, and it becomes more and more difficult to have a sort of diversity of different competitors vying for audiences. While great for conversions, and you should definitely spend some money on PPC and stuff, there's almost no brand effect either. So it's not like you'll get to know a brand or create a preference through PPC. It's mostly just for conversions in this way. There's also less information choice for consumers because of this narrowing of available options of information. So on the publisher side, this business is in a difficult situation. So firstly, there's a lot of clickbait, which is necessary because of the way that the internet has developed. There's a lot of outrage. There's a lot of quantity over quality. So all those journalists are just getting paid to type out as many articles as possible. But this business model was kind of shady before all of this, where online at least, they were buying clicks on the one side, and then their business model is basically selling those visitors for a higher amount than they bought it for. So yeah, they're really kind of like an arbitrage play. because them buying this traffic at a lower cost than that they're selling it for, kind of almost by definition, there needs to be some robots and fraud in there in order to make it work economically. And this is why there's such a high percentage of ad fraud with display advertising. And we need to take steps to combat that. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. I think AI is going to explode this industry even further. I mean, why would you read an article when you can just ask an AI what you want to know about? Yeah, same goes for search actually. So that will be something to keep an eye on. I think just very fair but kind of rough summary is that besides the quality media, the industry as a whole of publishers are content farms with a large robot audience. And you'll see that if you dive into the details. So, all of this is kind of an indictment of tracking and the way that we look at results. So, begs the question, who likes tracking anymore? And I think the answer is the kind of big five of online advertising, which is Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Apple. And I think Apple is a one that I always get questions about because people are like, yeah, no, they're so pro privacy and they're putting in place all of these things to make us safer and more private. Not really. They're just making it harder for their competitors to hoard the data, but they're still doing it themselves, and that's their whole game plan. It's just a competitive strategy. So other stakeholders, not so much. Marketers are confused. Data doesn't add up. Things that show conversions don't add any actual business. Attribution models can say what you want them to say. There's a lot of fraud, too many bad publishers. Publishers themselves are kind of burned out because of tracking and content farms and walled gardens and outright fraud eating up budgets. And quality media cannot really survive on advertising revenue. Audiences themselves don't really know who to trust, and they're overloaded with content and addicted to stimuli, and advertising sucks and it's mostly ignored unless it demands attention. And that's this really bad cycle of making more and more annoying advertising to get people's attention, and therefore getting people to tune out more and more as well. And people are worried about their privacy as well. So starting with Snowden and Russiagate and various data leaks and a general awareness of privacy issues, regulators have started to pay some attention and make some progress on legislation. So that's a little bit on the plus side there, I guess. So what do we do now? Where do we go? So I think, and this is the good old days part, I think we used to do advertising better. So it used to be slower, and we planned advertising based on media titles that had certain audiences, and there was a clear alignment of incentives because quality media attracted clear sort of advertising segments. Marketers had trust in their media buys, and consumers also had at least some trust in the publishers. Publishers, they could trust their income to some extent. We looked at results with statistics, for instance, in terms of incremental sales or through awareness studies and so on. We didn't have, or I shouldn't say we, I was not around for this time, but marketers didn't have fancy analytics and attribution models in the way that we have now, ingesting a ton of data. It was more direct. I'll talk more about that later. This is a really good ad, I think, to show how we used to do it. This ad is from David Ogilvy. If you don't know his books, I would highly recommend getting some if you can get them. This ad from Rolls-Royce, I know the backstory of how it came to be. So actually, David Ogilvy got this account. He went to go to the factory. He read everything there was to know about this, and he somehow found out that this amazing product detail about the Rolls-Royce, that the loudest noise in it when you're driving sort of 60 miles an hour is from the electric clock. So it's so quiet inside. And this sort of research, spending a long time making content that is like super interesting for people to read and so on. This type of thing is not done anymore because we need to hurry up. We need to make a new ad on Facebook or whatever, and we don't have time to do the type of research this requires. So I think if we're going back to the good old days, that would mean quality, trust, and statistics, those three things. Just a little bit, you might have seen this slide. It's not my slide, but this, I think, very clearly explains in general terms how advertising works, and I think this is a good background to discuss here. So advertising increases and maintains margins and sales by increasing the chance that people will choose your brand, by making the brand easy to think of and easy to buy, and creating positive feelings and associations, via broad reach ads that people find relevant and enjoyable, and targeted activation that they find relevant and useful. So if you start to unpick this, you will see that there's a lot to think about. But basically, what it's saying is that the function of advertising is to increase or maintain the number of sales and margins, and we want to do that by getting people to pick the brand and by making it easy to think of and easy to buy, and by creating positive feelings and associations. And if you just go through this, I'm just repeating it actually, if you just go through this one by one and sort of tick off the things that we're doing online, we're not really doing most of this. Especially the broad reach ads. This has been looked at scientifically over and over, and has been validated that it's much better to go broad and reach new audiences than hitting the same very limited niche audience over and over again. In at least in terms of creating awareness and preference. And then in terms of activation, it can be slightly more targeted because, of course, these should be people that have already heard of you. But it needs to be relevant and useful, not this huge buy now button or flashing in their faces. So again, a lot to unpack here once you start to really dig into, are we doing this at the moment? So also important to keep in mind is that customer journeys are not linear at all. Marketers think that people view a landing page, go to the pricing, sign up, and give their credit card details, and that's it. That might happen once or twice, but most of the times, customers do not follow a set path. If you are using Google Analytics currently, you can also see paths to purchase in there, and you'll see that there's 1,000 different paths. But this doesn't even take into consideration what people do off your site or in another session or on another device and so on. There's just no such thing as a sort of logical linear path that we can plan along. Your data also usually doesn't say what you think it does. So firstly, this is just 3 examples of different reports that you could be looking at. So one is the channel reports, so sort of what you get from your PPC accounts or social ads or your SEO agency or from your programmatic advertising platform. You'll in there see the largest amount of conversions because there's double counting and because everyone wants to have the credit and they're not talking to each other. And then if you look at the back end, like your CRM system or your order system or whatever, if you have some indication in there of where these people come from, you'll see that the vast majority of them will be either direct or unknown. And then you'll get a bunch that are coming through SEO. And if you dig deeper, you'll see that they've searched for your brand name. And then some come from PPC and some come from display. And then all the rest of it is just like zero, or it doesn't show up. Like, why doesn't it match up? Go shout at your agency. But, it doesn't really work that way. And then what your attribution would say is something completely different again, much less assisted in a certain way. And like, then you start to look at these 3 things, these tables, and you think to yourself, like, how am I supposed to make any decisions here? Like, it's not you're basically better off throwing a dart at any of these numbers and say, okay, this number go up, good, let's do more of that, because there's just no such thing as a clear-cut data point that you don't have to think about and interpret as a human. And this is also part of the reason why I think we should start to think more about humans than robots. And in fact, like humans plus robots is the best. And robots, I mean data and technical systems and so on. But I'd rather hire another analyst, like a person that's going to sit there and interpret the data and so on, than getting a fancy attribution system or anything like this, because it's just, the data is going to be too messy. I've seen this so many times, this situation like on this slide. Then another thing is that your data is probably too short term. So the also not my slide, by the way, but if you look at the data, you'll see that doing long-term studies and statistical analysis, you get 100% of the results through advertising. But attribution modeling, and that includes just doing that last click thing, will just get you 18%. And then if you do econometrics, you get to about half of it. And then, yeah, again, you'll get long-term studies. You'll get the vast majority of it, but the majority of the advertising returns actually occur in the long term. So you're missing out so much, and you'll notice, because if you, for some reason, your advertising campaign isn't running for a while, you'll still get business in, right? So there's this baseline of brand that you've built, and that comes from your advertising too. It's just not being attributed appropriately. Then, your ads are probably not creative enough. So this is a little bit older. This is, I think, 2018. I guarantee you it's gone up like a rocket ship. Nearly all TV advertising annoys me. I think that this looks even worse for online advertising. There's this rat race of being more and more annoying because people are not, they're overstimulated. They're just too many ads that are too annoying, and then they start to zone out and start to ignore it. And then brands need to be more annoying to get their attention. And there's this arms race, and that just means that ads are worse and worse on average. Your brand's probably fine. And then, there's an example here which kind of makes exactly the point I was going to make about humans plus robots. This is an ad, you probably can't read it, but this is an ad about from a marketing agency back in the day that already made the point that computers can't cry. A computer can tell you how old she is, it can tell you where she lives, how big her family is, what she buys, blah, 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 blah. But a copywriter, like someone, like a human, can tell you what makes her cry or laugh or buy. Marketing people should like computers, but love people that have insights that are actually looking at this and interpreting it. And until we have sort of AGI, artificial general intelligence, that is really good. It's going to keep on being the case that we need to just focus more on the human side of things. You also probably don't spend enough on brand building. So we, again, probably seen this slide before, but this shows the effects of advertising, both short-term sales activation and brand building, or if you might call it like conversion marketing or acquisition or whatever, and then brand building. And this is exactly why the yellow line is the short-term conversion marketing. This is exactly the reason why people keep on doing this, because in the short term, the results look really good. You get this sweet little bump, and then, it peters off after a while, and that's fine, but it's kind of predictable, and you get what you're investing. Whereas with the brand building, you'll see it's kind of like a stairs that keeps going up. You keep on adding to your results over time. The average number is you should be spending 60% on brand, 40% on conversion. You can do you can do brand online too, although it's more difficult, but there are some channels where you can do that. Think about higher impact video. Think about content related stuff and so on and so on. Whereas on the short term side of things, about 40%, as I said. If you have an online business, you probably actually need to do more in the real world and than online, because online businesses advertising online is to be expected, doesn't really drive trust. But an online business that does something in the real world, you're probably going to trust it more as a thing that really exists. I think the future of marketing is perhaps not just tracking of online advertising in general. It's more than tracking. So I think we should use tracking data for directional day-to-day operations if and when appropriate. So, this ad versus this ad, is it getting more clicks and that sort of thing. That's fine. We should be doing that. Attribution modeling can be useful for larger companies in the medium term, and I think we should move to a black box model of measurement for long-term strategic purposes. So if you look at this from a strategic value point of view, you'll see that channel tracking has very low strategic value, attribution mediocre, and that marketing mix modeling, econometrics, and so on has a very high strategic value, but it also doesn't have a lot of operational, like day-to-day, because it says something about the marketing mix and how you should be spending your overall budget, but not if the color red is better than the color green in your banner ad. And I think also we need to start planning advertising based on titles and channels and content with quality audiences again. So we go to publishers and different channels that have association with the thing that you're trying to sell and that have high-end audiences. And I think we should start to respect audiences and advertise with good creative design, make them laugh again. I mean, ads with humor work better than almost anything else. And we need to start spending more money on doing creative work and on hiring people to interpret stuff rather than on the technical, automatic, nerdy side, which I'm at least very inclined to gravitate towards, but making a conscious effort not to. We should also use advertising to build brand awareness and not just grab conversions. I think that's very important. Statistical analysis. So we look at incremental business brought by advertising. And this is that black box model that I mentioned before, where you look at the media dollars or euros that go in, something happens and business comes out. What is that something? Don't care. We just look at, does the advertising that I'm doing bring incremental business? So we can look at that very simply by testing turning off certain campaigns, channels, or tactics and line items and seeing the effect on business. You can look at this loss in business to the reduction in investment and, kind of actual returns, at least over the short term. And without turning anything off, we can also look at the correlation between input and output. How is your advertising spend related to business outcomes? But then, of course, you can get much more complicated with marketing mix modeling and a lot of other stuff. Remember that there are a lot of long-term effects, as well as macro and trend and seasonal and competitors and so on. And there's no silver bullet. So this is not something that you can go out and buy and then just, do what it says. It needs constant looking at and improving and interpreting and so on. And that's probably why it's so easy to sell, not that easy, but it's easier to sell a very expensive attribution modeling software and very difficult to sell a consultant that is going to just look at your advertising and see where the correlations are and start interpreting things and doing tests and so on. And that's, it's very involved and difficult. So that was it for now. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out if you have any questions, or you can, I think, type now. If not, let me know. Otherwise, check us out, MediaGroup, www.com. And also feel free to connect with me, Bart Burggraaf, on LinkedIn. If you have anything to add or wish to give me a compliment about my hair, I'd be happy to hear it. Have a nice day for now. And until the next time.